Expressed do not necessarily represent those of the station or its advertisers, although we think they should. But that's the opinion of America Matters Media.
This is not America. Sha-la-la-la-la. Little piece of you, a little piece in me will die.
Candace Owens, you'd think in a country like ours, very top, I mean, this is the most first world country that's ever been, you'd think the most civilized and the most just. Here you have to consider a murder case through the lens of politics. When you get to that point, haven't you already given up civilization?
Yeah, it's lost.
Well, that's correct. And what we're really seeing is mob justice, and that's really what happened with this entire trial. This was not a trial about George Floyd or Derek Chauvin. This was a trial about whether the media was powerful enough to create a simulation and decide upon a narrative absent any facts. Whether it was powerful enough to repeat showing and talking about a 9-minute clip that came from somebody's cell phone without adding any context, without showing the full, the full police video, which they could have released. They refused to release the full body cam, which would have added more clarity to the fact that the media was lying. The media came out, let's not forget this, Tucker. The media came out and told us that this was a man who was just getting his life together. He was a good, good member of society, and he got mixed up because a racist white police officer had it out for him and killed him. All of that fell apart. All of the facts came out, and all of that fell apart. We now know, of course, that he had enough fentanyl in him. It was 3 times the lethal dosage, 3 times lethal dosage in him when he died. But nobody cares because the media was successful in putting out a narrative, and they kept hitting that narrative. And the reason why the Democrats are happy is because they realize, of course, the media supports them. And now means the Democrats can get whatever they want because they can create a narrative, and then they can treat people like pawns and get them to basically say, if we don't get what we want, we will riot, we will loot, we will send these people out like soldiers to destroy your neighborhoods. And that is exactly what has happened. That has been the determination of this trial. The media and the Democrats now have enough power to bully and to lie to and to create propaganda and to successfully win. And that is what happened, and they are celebrating that win today. This was not a fair trial.
Only one side.
No person can say this was a fair trial.
You just got to take 3 steps back and acknowledge that only one side behaves this way. I mean, a jury in 1995 concluded that O.J. Simpson, despite DNA evidence, hadn't murdered 2 people, and there were no riots. But more to the point, there are a lot of people sitting behind, Trump voters sitting behind bars right now, have been for months, charged effectively with trespassing. We're not speculating. We've seen the charges. No Republican in the Congress stands up for them. Nobody mentions that. Nobody, is for prison reform when it's their political enemies. That's not equal justice, but nobody says it. Why is that?
Because we have 2 pandemics going on right now. There's a pandemic of ignorance in this country, and that is only allowed to fly because we also have a pandemic of cowardice in this country, okay? So we have people that are purposefully putting out a bunch of ignorant claims, and then we have people that are too cowardly to stand up and say, you know what, this is wrong. There has been so much that has been going on in this country that is wrong. You talk about it, I talk about it, but we do not have people that are sitting in Congress that are willing to take this fight where it needs to be taken. By the way, you bring up Maxine Waters inciting violence. I'm so old, Tucker, that I remember when a man said, march peacefully and patriotically to the Capitol, and that was considered an incite to violence, right? That was like, oh my God, stop the press, get this person disappeared from social media because he is calling for violence. Look at what Maxine Waters says. No one in the media is condemning these remarks. That same media that condemned Trump and his supporters for weeks on end is now defending Maxine Waters. And we both know this is not the first time that Maxine Waters has incited violence. Don't forget, rush down. If you see a Trump supporter, you got to rush them down in the restaurants. They're allowed to do this. They play by a different set of rules, but it's because we allow them to play with that different set of rules. They get away with virtually everything because we don't have strong people on our side that are willing to stand up. And that it's a sad conclusion. It really is so frustrating. And the idea of martyring George Floyd, the way Nancy Pelosi spoke about him, it completely forgives all of the trauma that he brought against his victims while he was alive. A man that served 7+ stints in prison while he was alive. armed robbery being two of the reasons why, and now we're going to martyr him and say that your name will forever be synonymous with justice? Imagine, Tucker, if you are one of his victims that is alive, one of his victims that he armed robbed, and you have to hear that this man's name will always be synonymous with justice. How would that feel to you? I feel like we are living in fiction right now in America. We are losing this country, and we are living in fiction because people are not strong enough to call out this stuff. And I feel like I'm one of the only ones who has the courage to say I will not be mobbed into a different reality.
Upside down, isn't it?
Yes. Well, this is Talking Truth to Power. I'm your host, Brendan Trainor, my co-host, Leland Faegre, and we decided to play Tucker Carlson's interview with Candace Owen last night.
The next Vice President of the United States. If we know what's good for us,
yes,
she'll be the next Vice President of the United States.
And, you know, I don't know, what I thought of this morning when I woke up was, you know, this is like the end of the American story about the sheriff who stands at the jailhouse door with a shotgun to keep the mob from lynching, you know, the criminal.
Does it by himself.
Yeah, he does it by himself. Now, they had 12 Americans there, and they refused to stand by the jailhouse door and stop the mob.
Yep.
And
to hear the media suggests that this is justice working.
I know.
Now, the process worked.
Right.
But the content clearly did not have anything to do with the ultimate verdict.
Right. And, you know, it's just such a shame that we're going down this road. You know, the evidence against Officer Chauvin, I don't know what kind of a cop he was, but we're only talking about this specific incident. And the evidence, as far as I could see, was not there.
Race never came into the subject.
Right. Yeah.
Except in the narrative.
Right.
Outside of the trial.
And there are several attorneys that have you know, granted they're mostly defense attorneys, but still, there was no clear cause of death. He had so many things going on, and just putting somebody prone on the ground and putting your foot on his neck, although it seems now that most of the time he had his foot on his shoulder, not his neck. There were no bruises to the neck, no sign of asphyxiation.
And his hypertension
Yes.
as a result of the ingestion of that fentanyl.
Right.
216 over 160.
Uh-huh.
Isn't that incredible? I thought you'd die if your blood pressure got that high.
Yeah. And the, you know, the official coroner's report was overruled by the prosecutors, basically. It doesn't bode well for the justice system.
The driving force in truck and auto repair. Everybody knows dynamic diesel.
Getting to know you.
Let me tell you about America Matters with Eddie Floyd. It comes on every Monday at noon. Don't want you to miss it. That's America Matters with Eddie Floyd.
Unable to listen to the whole show? A recording of today's program will be available later today. Visit americamatters.us and click on the podcast link. Now, back to the show.
Hey, welcome back. It's Talking Truth to Power. I'm your host, Brendan Trainor, my co-host, Leland Faegre, and we were talking about the American justice system in the light of the guilty verdict on Officer Chauvin for the killing of who some satirically call St. George Floyd.
Well, our live in studio audience seems to enjoy that.
But you know, he had some cred. I mean, he did some bad things, but I don't think he was a bad person per se. I mean, he had some street cred, which can be important in the black communities. But
well,
still,
I think that's an understatement because
Yeah.
effectively what we're doing here is what Candace Owen suggested in that segment with Tucker.
Right.
Was we're creating a martyr out of a criminal.
Right.
You can't keep doing this.
And you know, Speaker of the House Pelosi, good Catholic as she is,
Whatever that means.
yeah, she likened it to a blood sacrifice. You know, he sacrificed
For her
us-
cause.
Yeah, for her cause.
Yeah.
Yeah. To expiate our sins, which you know is not very well liked by me. And in the meantime, on Capitol Hill, you know, we had the revelation after all these weeks that Officer Sicknick did not die from being hit on the head with a fire extinguisher by the insurrectionist mob, but he actually had 2 strokes the next day.
I can't remember when I've ever heard of that. I guess
Right.
one's minor, and then
I guess
the
so,
following
yeah.
one is the one
Yeah,
that takes
it could
some.
have been 2 blood clots. I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah. And then Ashley Babbitt, the officer that killed the white woman who was merely climbing through a broken window, no weapons
Yeah.
to show.
No. She had a sandwich and a thermos in her backpack.
Yeah. And the Capitol Hill police officer will not be charged with anything, even though they're concentrating on the willful aspect, not the aspect of excessive force, which it was. It violated the protocols of the police, and but it wasn't willful. He didn't hate her. He didn't try to kill her because he knew her and hated her. But willful could be he violated the police protocols in a willful manner. I mean, that's all you would need to charge him with something. But they're not going to charge him for killing the white woman.
Well, there were a comprehensive list of just a complete breakdown of understanding about that event, leading
Right.
up to it. It's government, and as we always know it to be, just completely incompetent.
Right.
It doesn't do anything well.
No. And then now we have 2 more shootings of young blacks, and 1 shooting of a black teenager trying to stab somebody. I don't know if that's going to be controversial, but
Oh, I think it is. Any excuse will do.
now Dante Walker, the young man that tried to flee the scene, and everybody's focusing on the fact that the policewoman thought she had a taser, but I think if it goes to trial, the defense is going to argue that even if
Actually, it's not.
just put aside the whole taser business,
Yeah.
she was within her rights to shoot him because he was fleeing from a gun warrant. He had some kind of record, although it's not clear whether he was prosecuted or convicted of anything, but apparently he and his buddy were sleeping over this woman's house, and they saw that she had put the rent money in her bra, and he tried to strong-arm her and reach into her bra to steal the rent money.
Any excuse will do.
And he was waving his gun at the time, saying he would kill her, but
By the way, we got his name wrong last week. I was a little closer than you were.
okay.
His name is White.
Oh,
Yeah, Dante White, not Walker.
not Walker?
No.
I thought I copied it off the news reports. but-
Yeah, well, I mean, we were discussing it at the time. I think I said it was right.
Okay.
I was wrong, but I was
All
a little
right.
closer than you were. But anyway, the point
Yeah,
is
he
that
was
this
trying
guy,
to flee in a vehicle.
and
right?
they knew this. There
Right.
was a warrant out for his arrest as they were pulling him over.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the story is they pulled him over for expired tags and/or
Well, why
air fresheners hanging
the
from,
sequ-
and then after they pulled him over, they found the
the
warrant.
sequence is that if you see expired tags, that's what they do first,
Uh-huh.
and then in the consequence, the next level down is are there any warrants?
Oh
out
yeah, sure.
So
Yeah, so that's what they did. And then 13-year-old Adam Toledo, he looks like a cute young kid in family pictures, but in fact, he was out at night with a 20-year-old friend who had a gun.
it's a
And
gang member.
yeah, he was shooting into the air or shooting at buildings or whatever.
He was being drawn into the gang
Right.
environment.
Well, so obviously the 20-year-old didn't want to get an adult charge, so he asked Adam apparently to take his gun, and Adam complied and ran away. And he's in a dark alley. He did throw the gun behind the fence apparently, but who knows if the officer saw his outstretched hands?
Now
I mean, he fired instinctively.
Now, whether that 20-year-old will become an accessory to the murder of the child,
Yeah,
that's
that's another story.
yeah.
And then, of course, we also have the 15-year-old who was shot in Columbus, Ohio, for wielding a knife and lunging it at another young lady.
Micaiah Bryant.
Micaiah Bryant, yeah. She's such a motherly person.
She really is. Loving, peaceful little girl, had a motherly nature about her.
Well, she wasn't very little either from the pictures I saw.
And we know this because the mother of Micaiah Bryant said so.
Yes. So where is the talk? You know, we keep hearing that all black parents...
You mean except here?
Yeah, we keep hearing that they all give their kids the talk. You know, don't resist arrest. Put your hands on the steering wheel.
Yeah.
You know, don't make any sudden movements.
Yeah, once upon a time, if they told you to put your hands behind your back or put your hands up, we did this.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. I mean,
resisting arrest, it seems like it's emblematic of the culture.
Mm-hmm. Right. And
whatever you do, don't. You know, is now what the maxim is.
Right. So, you know, you just can't blame the police for these incidents, although there are incidents in which you can blame the police. I do believe in police reform, when Congress hasn't done anything about police reform ever since the senator from South Carolina, Scott, tried to introduce some kind of police reform. The Democrats shot it down.
Right, and it was minimal. There really wasn't much to it because there isn't much you can really do. If they're going to resist arrest, I mean, where do you begin with that?
Right.
How do you begin to reform if the civilian population isn't going to concede to a request to do something?
Well, I think real police reform would be qualified immunity for egregious violations. The standard is that I feared for my life. There has to be a higher standard than the police just saying, I feared for my life in the most mundane situations, although in the case of somebody running away with a gun in a dark alley, that could very well be a good... So it's not a blanket... prohibition on that, but also just things like keeping a real database, so when bad cops get flushed out of one municipality or state, they can't go to another municipality and get a police job, or make it harder for them with a real database to track these people. But
you know how many black deaths at the hands of law enforcement took place last year?
You know, I can't quote the statistic off the top of my head, but it wasn't that many.
18.
18, yeah.
And I think very few of those were controversial.
Right.
So it's mostly black-on-black violence is what we're talking about.
That's the primary reason for the death, premature death of black people, is black-on-black violence.
And the propaganda media is trying to conflate the two.
Right.
Basically is what Candace Owens was saying in her interview with Tucker, is that they want us stupid so that we can't figure this stuff out. Mm-hmm. And they will take the narrative from there. As long as we're stupid, they won't look into it, you know. And it's a welfare state culture that we've groomed over the past several generations.
Right.
We're not well educated.
Yep. And it's the loss of individual responsibility, it's collectivism, it's all kinds of things that we shouldn't be involved in as a free country. Right. And as with a justice system that's supposed to be, like Judge Janine said to Greg, you know, we're not supposed to inflict injustice or do injustice to individuals for the sake of the society as a whole.
Right.
That's not the way the system is set up.
No.
It's
No,
just
it's
the
not.
opposite. And
That's the way it's migrated.
yes.
And we have to address it quickly. I mean, we will not survive as a nation.
Yeah.
This, because the breakdown of justice
Yeah.
is the precursor to civil war, and we've maintained on this show for a couple of years that we are in a civil war threshold right as we speak.
Yep. It's a new. It's definitely a Cold War, as people on the left and the right are not talking to each other, and they're not living in the same neighborhoods. Studies have shown that the zip codes are segregated between Republicans, Democrats, and IPOCs.
BIPOCs.
Yeah, BIPOCs. Yeah, and those people, and Tucker also talked about the Great Replacement, and Ted Lieu just came out flat and said it, and they're all saying it. Biden's saying it. White people will be in the minority in a few decades, and they're fueling the fire.
You know why, don't you?
Yeah, because
Systemic racism.
it's systemic racism. Yeah. Yeah, the Democrats are full of systemic racism.
The first responders are nothing but black people. Firemen and policemen. Where's the systemic racism?
Sliced fish sandwiches every day, made right before your eyes. The port of Subway could be a smoking number 5 or a classic number 8, or maybe an Italian is your number 1 fade. Whatever you crave, prepare to fall in love. Sliced fish sandwiches, port of Subs.
This is America Matters Media on AM 1180 KCKQ, a Lotus broadcast station. The power of radio since 1967.
Are you shy and don't want to talk on the air? Text us your questions or comments to 775-237-2266. Now, back to the show.
Hey, welcome back. It's Talking Truth to Power. I'm your host, Brendan Trainor. My co-host is Leland Faegre. And you're not going to hear it on CNN or MSNBC or even Fox, but Russia and Belarus foiled an assassination coup on the president of Belarus, Mr. Lukashenko. And they are blaming the United States, among other players, probably Ukraine as well. This helps, and that maybe this helps explain the irrational foreign policy of President Biden, where he keeps doing insanely stupid things. Maybe the whole thing was supposed to be coordinated as one big grand event. In other words, he calls Putin a killer without a soul. Then he okays the Ukrainian troop deployment to the Donbass. Then he orders 2 destroyers into the Black Sea, which requires giving Turkey a week notice. So we know that it was done. And then Putin and Lavrov tells him to back off. He does. But he and the EU and NATO tell President Zelensky they won't back his war. Okay. So Macron and Merkel said that the Minsk agreements, which would require the Ukraine to talk directly with the dissidents in the Donbass, they said that that's still in force. Germany and France are actually the ones that signed on the deal as the enforcers.
Well, that's schizophrenia right there.
Right.
That's all you need to know.
I know. But then we get the story about the Russian bounties again. He talks about the Russian bounties, and then the intelligence community says, wait a minute, we don't really believe that there were any Russian bounties.
Are they just trying to be relevant? Is that
Yeah.
the foreign policy? This is, you know.
Then he asked Putin for talks again. I mean, this is going in crazy directions. But what if it was all one big coordinated push attempt to discredit Putin and possibly have regime change? They were going.
Oh, I see. You're thinking about Kamala now.
I'm talking about maybe Victoria Nuland,
Yeah, I
the
see
deep
what you're saying.
state.
Yeah.
You know, she's back in the.
It'll have to be coordinated.
Yeah.
And so that's what I see what you're saying.
Yeah, because
They
they
give the appearance of.
right. They were given the appearance of Russia being aggressive and attacking the Ukraine, but Putin put an end to that by quickly ordering troops and ships into the region, and then have Lukashenko be assassinated. And now this was all over Russian TV. I know it didn't make American TV.
No, not even Fox.
No, but they actually videotaped, and this was not some half-demented Arab guy on the street that the FBI entraps into saying he's going to bomb somebody, you know.
No, it's
This-
behind the scenes.
No, this was actually state actors,
Yep.
you know, that had state positions, and they
Deep state.
deep state, and they were plotting the assassination of a head of state that has done nothing to America, And we had Belarus, as far as I know, has never attacked the United States.
As far as I know. History was one of my favorite subjects.
But they want him out of there because they want to discredit Putin. And so Putin called the brand new American ambassador. His name is Sullivan. You know, the head of the Security Council is also a Sullivan.
Is he Irish?
Yeah, he's got. Biden is like JFK. He's bringing in the Irish mafia to rule for him. But
and that's what they are, all right.
Right. And so, you know, all of this could have been to possibly finally cancel Nord Stream 2, which Merkel said once again she's going to see it completed. Mm-hmm. And then the Czech Republic, out of the blue, suddenly blamed Russia for an ammo dump explosion that happened 7 years ago in 2014, and it was deemed an accident at the time. So on top of the charges being ludicrous, it takes on a comic opera.
A sense of desperation.
Yeah, because they tried to pin it on the two wild and crazy guys.
Right.
They tried to blame the Skripal poisoning on it.
It makes you wonder whether the architects of this cacophony, for lack of a better word, is for them funny.
We choose truth over facts.
You know, and I've often thought that those late night sessions during the campaign leading up to the election was about these kinds of things. How could we, you know, demonstrate our competency, but at the same time make it look like we weren't. This kind of
right.
You know?
So I don't know if Biden.
Your guess is as good as mine on that, but
according to the Kremlin, the last time Biden spoke to Putin told him about the plot, and the Kremlin readout, the transcript says Biden gurgled and said nothing.
Well, but he's doing that quite a bit in his first 90 days or so.
Yeah.
So we don't know whether he understands what is actually going on.
Well, the incident in Prague, it could be that he doesn't. The incident in Prague was probably one of the Prague executives was supposed to be in Moscow to discuss accepting the Russian vaccine, Sputnik V. Mm-hmm. So it's going to kill that. And then Russia was in the bidding to retrofit a Czech nuclear power plant. So that's going to be killed. The American corporation Westinghouse will probably get the contract for that. So they're trying to set up an iron curtain. They're trying to continually separate Russia from Western Europe, is what is going on. And they're probably going to make it harder for even Russians to visit Western Europe. And, you know, Russia used to love Western Europe, and now I understand.
They're a part of Europe.
Yeah. Well, sure, the western part of Russia. I mean, it's the Russian symbol is the two-headed eagle, one head pointing west and one head pointing east. Mm-hmm. But, you know, the Russian people are becoming more and more disillusioned about the West. They know a lot of people, according to recent polls in Russia, no longer consider themselves to be part of Europe. They're looking to Asia, and Russia and China are. And then also Iran, in the meantime, in response to all this, Iran is enriching its uranium to 60%. And I believe that is higher than the extra protocols, but they're fed up with Israel trying to sabotage their peaceful nuclear program. And then China, at the time, announced that they are looking seriously into a gold-backed cryptocurrency to evade the sanctions. Gold-backed.
Wow.
And they've been buying tons of gold.
Well, that will be the way to get around the cryptocurrencies.
Yes.
If it was backed by gold.
Right.
Because I think that's going to be a flop. That's going to fall right through the Earth's surface sometime in the future. If FDR could do it with gold, how difficult would it be to do it with the cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, I know. If they are currently seeing it as a challenge, I'm sure, even though Bitcoin is supposed to decrease back down to 30 or 1,000 or so.
Well, I actually like the technology. I think this is great stuff.
Yeah.
And I love the competition to central banking, which is exactly why they don't like it.
Exactly.
They're going to do something about it at some point.
Government is a monopoly, essentially, and everything it touches, and they don't like competition.
Right.
You know? So, and on the national level as well. I mean, nobody cared about China until they became an economic powerhouse. Now, all of a sudden, they're the worst people in the world.
Well, the elitists that brought them in to the economic globalism still don't care.
Right. And then we had good people like Colonel Wilkerson testifying at the UN about the Organization for the Prevention of Chemical Warfare, their doctored report on Syria. And he testified against it, and so did other activists. But I think they still kind of censored Syria over the non-incident.
He was a counsel to Secretary of Defense Powell.
Yes, he actually helped prepare Powell's infamous weapons of mass destruction speech at the UN, of which he, of course, denounced after he found out the truth.
Yeah. Well, who was giving him that information?
Right, exactly.
Deep state operative. I mean, Trump really wasn't president of the United States except in title only.
Right.
He could not control even his own White House. If you remember, all the disarray in his own White House.
All the leaks. And
everything that came out of there. Yeah. It was an embarrassment.
And they lied to him about the number of troops in the Middle East. They prevaricated. He'd give an order and they wouldn't follow it out. They had Vindman turning him into Schiff.
Vice President Vindman?
Yes. Because he didn't like Trump's foreign policy.
I mean, it's beyond comprehension.
Yeah.
And he was right there. Right? Breathing the same air.
Right.
But Trump says he's beyond seriously considering a 2024 bid, so that's that.
Okay.
My only question is, who's the running mate? And I am
leaning to Candace.
Candace Owens has got to be the person, because that will stave off this effort to exploit the black vote, which is unfortunately not a particularly smart vote. They haven't become part of the American landscape. They're not working. They're sitting around watching televisions, doing drugs. These people have not become part of our life, and those are the people that they want to keep poor and stupid.
Right. Keep pulling that D lever.
Yep.
Did you know that 4,000 years ago, the Earth's magnetic field was 5 Gauss? Over the last 165 years, scientists have measured the Earth's magnetic field and found that today it is only 0.5 Gauss.
This is America Matters Media on AM 1180 KCKQ, a Lotus broadcast station, the power of radio since 1967.
To join the conversation, call 844-790-TALK. That's 844-790-8255. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Talking Truth to Power. I'm your host, Brendan Trainor, and I'm here with Leland Faegre discussing the news of the day, which has not always been the best today.
Well, you're going to get the news here. You won't get the news on the propaganda meeting.
Right.
That's right.
No, so that's for sure. Now, if you Google it, you're going to get quite a few articles recently that is claiming that new research has shown that the transgender movement has been kind of hijacked by activists promoting pedophilia. And what they're actually doing, it's not transgenderism itself, as I read it, because I think transgenderism is a legitimate, thing, a fact. But it's the allowing minors to transition to another gender without parental consent. Mm-hmm. And that's being called a backdoor to pedophilia. Why? Because pedophilia is, and now, again, you have to be careful because pedophilia is used as a generic word for any kind of sex with a minor under 18, but pedophilia specifically refers to having relations with a minor 12 years, under 12, you know, preteen.
Yeah, we're
like
not talking
9,
about 17-year-olds. Yeah,
right, yeah. Or even 14 or 15-year-old, perhaps,
that would be Arkansas.
For gay relations.
Shut
But
up.
because it is considered a sexual orientation, that some have used the transgender movement to slip man-boy love, as it was called, Lambda. Remember them? I remember seeing demonstrations by them. They don't have a public face right now.
Long time.
Yeah. But in the 70s, when they were discussing, gays and transgender activists were discussing their strategy way back in the 1970s. The idea is that they pushed through the concept of self-identifying your gender, and that self-identification by itself
gave them license.
Should be enough to enforce social recognition,
right?
Which very few of us here actually believe in. No. I mean, now you can identify as anything.
Okay, you can use the other toilet.
Yes, yeah. Or, but the idea is that if children are given the agency to self-identify and transition without parental consent, that could lend itself eventually for license to minors to consent to pedophilia.
Yep.
Is the thinking.
It's a short step.
Right.
To me, it seems like and that could be a big part of what's going on the border as well.
On the border?
Yeah.
And how do you drive the border?
We're bringing a lot of children up here.
Oh, yeah.
Unaccompanied minors.
Well, yeah, that could tie into it.
Creating an industry.
Well, and this is one reason why I broke away from the Libertarian Party. In the last legislative session, they were talking about banning conversion therapy, which is parents asking a psychologist to talk to their child who is having gender dysphoria problems. And, of course, in the beginning, there were a lot of anti-gay people that were using it. Conversion therapy sometimes entailed what's called aversion therapy, where you give a child something to make them sick, or you pin. The classic is the movie Clockwork Orange, where they opened up the eyes and kept pouring eye drops in so he'd blink, and then they kept showing scenes of sexual violence so he would be disgusted by it and things of that nature. But that's not the conversion therapy. That is the modern conversion therapy is simply talk.
Yeah.
And so banning conversion therapy, banning children being able to talk about these things to a qualified psychologist, to me, was not only a First Amendment violation, but it didn't make medical sense either.
Right.
And so I know the LP issued a statement saying that the Libertarian Party, if you don't know what LP means, that parents, I talked about parental rights, and they say parents don't have rights, only individuals have rights. Even if you're 8 years old, you've got the rights to choose this sort of thing. And
they were off on a number of issues, but that was another one. Yeah.
Yep. And well, we're getting more and more stories about young people that transition too early, and then they realize that they weren't really transsexual. Maybe they were gay, but it's kind of too late to come to that realization when you've already had surgeries and hormone therapy.
Can't go back.
And that's why I applauded Senator Rand Paul when he confronted Rachel Levine, the HHS transgender nominee by Biden, over this, not talking about transgenderism itself, but talking about minors being subjected to gene blockers, hormone blockers, and in today's day and age, there's a certain amount of these kids are Peter Pan kids.
Yeah.
They don't want to grow up. So they're confused about what it is to grow up in this day and age, and they're getting these hormone blockers to help them avoid growing into an adult.
And the culture has recognized
Right.
this, and encourages it.
Right. And, and now there is a bill in the Nevada legislature. This is a little bit off the topic, but just to show you, there's a bill in the Nevada legislature that has passed committee, I believe, and with a Democrat-controlled legislature, it'll probably be put into law to allow transgender prisons to be transferred to, a women's facility.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And,
we're in brand new territory on all this stuff.
I know.
We've never been here before. So.
I know. It's like suddenly we woke up and realized there were people who don't believe they're in their real bodies.
And I think if we were to take a principled libertarian position on this, that we would just be concerned about how it was paid for. Because I think what they're looking for is taxpayer largesse to subsidize these trends.
Right.
And without it, they wouldn't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. But that part of the discussion is not part of the narrative you hear.
Speaking of taxpayer largesse, our esteemed legislature has passed, and it will be on the ballot, the next ballot, another equal rights amendment.
Yeah.
Which would likely lead to taxpayer-funded abortions in Nevada. So, I don't know. It's
California has come to us.
Yes.
You know the thing.
Yeah. We're going to find out the thing. Hopefully it's not too late. But
right. So we're not in a good spot. Also, this week I listened to the Nevada Policy Research Institute. They had a webinar on their suit regarding the separation of powers, and they mentioned that the Senate Majority Leader, Nicole Cannizzaro, she is not only an employee in the executive branch, she's an officer. She's a assistant DA for Clark County. And she's serving in the legislature, which is a blatant violation of the separation of powers.
Didn't you bring that up in your candidacy several years back?
Right, because Nevada Constitution specifically says that you can't do any functions in another branch. So it's stronger than some of these, say, state constitutions, because it's been deemed over the years that you can't even be just a simple employee in the executive branch and serve in the legislature. And she's more than just a mere employee. She's an assistant DA, and she's going to, push legislation that the district attorney's office is going to agree with.
She's there for a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
To do damage.
Right. The Republican candidates that lose to these people that are in both branches of the legislature, they should do what I did. I mean, I know NPRI has a suit in the courts, but they should file a contest of election and say they're not eligible to run for the legislature. It would create publicity even if they lose.
Yeah, even if they don't win, it would be the proper perspective
and
to
then
have
you
on
could
it.
go to court as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I know Connie Schottenheimer, I forget her last name. I remember first name was Connie. She was the judge. I went to court too, and she dismissed my case because they don't believe the Constitution means what it says.
No. It's just something to observe and not follow.
Right. Pay lip service to when it's convenient.
Yeah.
Right.
When it suits them.
That's why they want to pack the court.
Yeah.
They want to get the originalists out of there.
Same with the D.C. statehood.
Right.
These people are just completely out of control because they know they've only got a year and a half to pull this off.
Right.
They have to do as much damage as they can in that amount of time because it will go back to Republican hands.
So we're dependent on keeping the filibuster for relevant issues, and we're dependent on having a few Democrats, blue dog Democrats, vote with to stop the excesses.
But the first thing we have to do is to correct and make sure that kind of fraud, electoral fraud, doesn't recur. And it looks like here that electionsintegrity.org has identified 12,547 illegal votes in Georgia's 2020 the election.
Yeah, I saw that.
That would be.
That would, that was the 12,000 votes Trump was looking for on the phone call.
That would exceed the margin of victory, and the same thing is happening in Arizona.